Hello, welcome back. Today we're here to talk about 2004's Spider-Man 2. Starting off with the plot and storyline, this one had a lot clearer of a story than Spider-Man did. I liked it better in the sense that Spider-Man had like several plots and stories that kind of chopped throughout the movie, where Spider-Man 2 had one very distinct story with just a couple little side guys going on. You had the main story was about Peter Parker, who was like struggling with his normal life, and then was wanting to start balancing his normal life and his superhero life, and then he eventually quits, and then it's about him learning why he can't quit, essentially.
Yeah. At the beginning, you see that he's having a hard time balancing being a human being and being a demigod, basically. He was having such a hard time because he always had somebody to save, but he didn't have time for his classes, and he didn't have time to make money, and he didn't have time to support Aunt May. And in a lot of ways, that's the kind of Peter Parker that we needed, because he's a teenager. He's going through college. He's broke. Take it from two dudes who are going through college.
Mm-hmm.
We're broke.
Yeah.
And he was struggling to balance that. And so it made a lot of sense what he chose to do as he tries to give up being Spider-Man so that he can focus on himself. And while he does that, he does very well, but he realizes, I can't stop caring about other people. There's a moment when he runs into a burning building, and in that moment he realizes, I still have to be Spider-Man.
Yeah, and what I will say is they set up, the way they tell the story, they set up his struggles really well, because they focus on all of them. They focus on him, his teacher yelling at him for missing classes. They focus on him getting fired from his job. They focus on him struggling with his relationships with Mary Jane, who he knows he can't be with, and Harry, who blames his alter ego for killing his father. There's all these struggles that it's showing, and it portrays it really well. What I will say is it gets really slow in the middle of the movie. And that's kind of what takes this score down for me a little bit. I think they told the story really well, and the story was a good idea. But I got bored. It just becomes very boring when you get Peter Parker and no Spider-Man for a good chunk of this movie. I'd say almost like a third of this movie is just no Spider-Man, and I'm here to see a Spider-Man movie. You know what I mean? So it was kind of boring during parts for me.
There were times when it was boring, and there was also some things that just didn't quite make sense, like why they chose. Because if you want a movie to be realistic, and we're going to set aside the fact that Spider-Man can climb on walls and shoot webs for a minute.
Right.
If you want a movie to be realistic, then people have to act like people. And like Dr. Octavius, instead of stealing the equipment that he needed to build the thing, he decides to steal money and then buy the equipment for his thing, which was like a nuclear reactor. But the thing is that, like, who's selling this dude parts for a nuclear reactor?
Right.
Where he could just be like, here's a bag full of gold coins. I would like 100 metal. Or, I don't know. But, like, he was building this thing. Dude, just steal the thing. If you're going to steal, like, it didn't make any sense there. And then when Harry is like, oh, Peter Parker, you're Spider-Man? Does that mean that I need to kill you now? Instead of him being like, hold on, man. So I didn't kill your father's Green Goblin. I didn't kill him. He killed himself. But we can talk about that. Just, give me some time to save MJ. He was like, no, I'll just tell me where MJ is.
There's more going on here between you and me. And then he never goes back to Harry. And that's the other thing that always drove me crazy. Like, Harry, his best friend's here struggling this, like, dilemma of what he wants to do. And Peter never goes back to him and explains anything. Like, that's just... Yeah.
That's a bad friend is what that is.
Yeah, it's a bad friend. And so there's just a lot like that. And, like... It's a good movie. It's a good story. It just, the way it's told is kind of slow. And like Ben said, it's pretty unrealistic, although I'm more willing to forgive it for that. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. I think it was good. They need to pick up the pace a little bit in parts for me.
Yeah. I give it a 3 out of 5 for the pacing issue. I mean, here's the thing. I don't think that Aunt May was a terrible actress. But I found every scene she was in to be mind-numbingly dull.
Yeah.
Except for the bank robbing.
Yeah, that was a good scene.
That was a good scene. Any scene where Spider-Man and Doc Ock were on the same area was a great
That was a fantastic... The action, we'll get to the action,
Yeah.
but it's really good.
But,
so yeah, good story, good ideas, and even the subplots are pretty good with Harry still wanting to kill Spider-Man and Mary Jane fighting a rebound who she almost marries, which is just kind of ridiculous, but... It
is what it is.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah.
It's just the pacing. That was really the biggest issue I had.
Absolutely.
I'm Spider-Man. No more. no more.
The acting in this movie left a lot to be desired. I will tell you that I had 2 characters that got a full point. So if you start at 0, I gave J.J. Jonah Jameson. That's too many J's. I gave J. Jonah Jameson an entire point of himself because he's fantastic.
He's really good.
I also gave Doc Ock a full point, and then everybody else combined got a collected 0.5. It was just... First of all, I do not buy the chemistry between Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst.
It's bad.
I don't buy it. It's not there. It's non-existent.
I will say they focused on that a lot less in this one, which
Thank
I appreciated.
heavens.
I really appreciated that, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because the thing about them specifically is that they're both kind of awkward, and they just don't have chemistry. I don't think that they wanted to have chemistry, like those actors. I feel like they probably like high-fived on their way out of the studio, never to talk to each other again. You know, like that's the kind of relationship it seemed like they had outside the movie. So I didn't buy that. But I will say that JJ was fantastic. I loved every scene with him in it. Doc Ock was pretty dang good.
He was good.
I enjoyed the scenes with him.
Yeah.
And I really liked we'll talk about the action later. I will say this, Tobey Maguire did a little bit better as Spider-Man in this one. Like, he had a few more one-liners, not nearly enough, but...
No, my thing with Tobey Maguire is he's not Spider-Man very much in this movie, so there's that. But also, he's just... I don't know, like, there are some moments when I'm like, he's okay. Like, there's a scene where the neighbor next door is, like, catching her something on fire, and he's just staring, and, like, the door slowly closes and eyes get really big. And, like, there's certain things that he does well. But his line delivery is not good. He's got no chemistry. And Kristen Dunst is even worse in this movie to me than she was in the first one. She's hard to watch. She was so hard to watch in this one. James Franco is still just okay. He's better than the 2 leads, in my opinion. Yeah. But there are some times even for him, I'm like, oh, man, that delivery wasn't good.
Which is too bad, because James Franco is actually a pretty good actor.
Yeah. I think he was pretty young in these movies. Yeah. He was young to his career.
He didn't really know what he was yet. But I would agree with that. I would say that as like most of the extras were just kind of there. Yeah. Just to like fill up screen, I guess. Although the train scene,
that was good.
Those extras did a pretty decent job. Except, okay, if Spider-Man's slowing down your train and he tries to stop it with your feet and he jumps back up, you're not going to say any more bright ideas. Like, that's not a thing that you would say. That's Spider-Man, dude. Yeah. He's doing his best to save your life.
Yeah. No, it's true.
Not a time for sass, my G.
Yeah, that guy wasn't the best. But yeah, I mean... Overall, it's just not good acting. Like Ben said, there's a couple people in there. I think Doc Ock was good. I enjoyed him. I enjoyed what they did with that character. Mm-hmm. He doesn't ever stand out as much to me as Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin does, but he's a good Doc Ock. Yeah. I think I like that they made him sympathetic. I think that's part of what was good about him. But absolutely. I gave the acting and characters a 2.5 out of 5 just because other than Kristen Dunst, I'm not extremely offended by anyone's performance, but I don't think any of them are good. I can't give them any really credit for that.
I also gave it a 2.5 out of 5. It was just, again, you get 1 point for JJ, 1 point for Doc Ock, and half a point for the remainder of the cast.
Yeah. Not that good, but decent.
Do you love me or not?
When it comes to action, this is like fantastic. This is one movie that when I think about it, it's the action sequences, I think. Particularly the train scene.
Absolutely.
The train scene in this movie is phenomenal. Just you see Spider-Man and Doc Ock just going at each other, and they're not holding anything back. You know, Spider-Man is wanting to beat him down so he can find out where Mary Jane is. Doc Ock's trying to knock him out so he can bring him to Harry. And the scene is just so fun to watch, and the action looks so clean and so good. Choreography was fantastic. Phenomenal. And even, that's the best scene by far, but even the bank scene was really fun to watch.
That's a scene I was going to bring up. That's definitely a scene I was going to bring up. Yeah. The action in this movie is just great to watch. You get to see Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. Let's face it, it wasn't Tobey Maguire in those scenes, but all kinds of acrobats. It felt like Spider-Man, lots of aerial motion. Yeah. And it was fun to watch the different fighting styles between the two, because you have, on one end, Spider-Man, who is inexplicably extremely acrobatic. Where did he learn to do these flips? I assume just on the street, maybe? Probably, I don't know. He didn't do it before.
With practice.
Can spiders do backflips? Not that I've ever seen. But anyway, You see Tobey Maguire be very acrobatic, lots of kicks and flips and tricks and spits and all kinds of things. Mm-hmm. And then you have Doc Ock, who's a little bit more clumsy. Mm-hmm. You know, he's got these massive metal arms on his back. He's falling around, but he's throwing a lot of weight behind each of his blows, and he's throwing these things. And he's like ripping off parts of buildings and chucking them. And it's just cool to watch. And then it's also cool to watch Spider-Man use his spider sense to fix things. You know, if he gets a chunk of a building thrown at him, he throws it back.
Yeah.
You know, in split-second reaction. It was just great. I loved watching the action sequences in this movie. I think that they hold up as some of the best action sequences we've had up to date.
I agree with that. I really, yeah. Even some of the little smaller action sequences, like when he's stopping like a bunch of robbers in a car, like,
yeah,
that was cool. It
Absolutely.
was cool to watch. Everything about it was cool. I gave it a 5 out of 5, which is the first time I've done that for action, just because of how much it stands out to me.
Yeah, I also gave it a 5 out of 5. I have no complaints about the action in this movie.
Yeah, really, really, really good. Top notch.
Where is she?
Oh, she'll be just fine. Let's talk.
I enjoyed a lot of the cinematics of this movie. There was one scene that I remember saying, Eric, this is the same shot that they were on before. Like it was like a 10, 15, 20 second shot of Spider-Man swinging through New York. And it was just great to look at. I love Spider-Man's costume. The costume design, I don't think, changed between this movie and the last movie. I might be wrong.
Maybe a little bit.
But it looked really good. Mm-hmm. I also liked Doc Ock's costume design.
Yeah?
Well, first of all, like, one of the things that always kind of bothered me is that in most movies, men have abs. If you take off their shirt, they will have abs. And I get it. If I was an actor, I would do my very best to look great in case there was a beach scene.
Right.
But Doc Ock was a scientist.
Mm-hmm.
He spent his time researching. And so when he takes off his shirt and he's got a science bod, that's not a bad thing. And it made a lot of sense. And it didn't take me out of the movie. If he had ripped off his shirt and had a rippling 12-pack, I would have been taken out of the movie.
Yeah, for sure.
But the things that they chose to do, they made me feel like I was there.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. No, I agree. The cinematics were all very good in this movie. What I will say is, like, the first one, the cinematics like stood out to me a lot. Like, I love the cinematics in the first movie. And I enjoyed the ones in the second one, but like it kind of comes back to the problem of when he is no longer Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. They don't do anything cool with cinematics because they don't need to, because he's just Peter Parker and he's just wandering around the streets and he's going to school and he's doing all these things. During all of that, there's nothing special about the cinematics. I mean, so there's a good chunk of this movie where they don't do anything really that cool and really that interesting to me. But whenever it's Spider-Man or whenever it's Doc Ock or whenever there's action, it's phenomenal. So I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 because it's really, really good. There's just a lot of it that a good chunk of this movie they didn't feel like they had to try, so they didn't with the cinematics, in my opinion.
Yeah, I felt pretty similar. I also gave it 4 out of 5 or 4.5 out of 5. The reason for me is almost entirely the long shots in the movie. Mm-hmm. It really bothers me in movies where you have really quick cuts. It bothers me because you can't feel like you're there. It's impossible to become engrossed in a movie when you're looking from a different angle every 13 seconds. Not even that, like every 0.5 seconds. But in this movie, it felt like you were there most of the time because you'd have long, engaging shots. So I had to give it a 4.5 out of 5. I can't give it a 5 because, I mean, it wasn't perfect. And like you said, especially during the middle, there was some scenes where you're just like, you could have done something there.
Yeah.
You know, you could have done something there. But yeah, great cinematics.
Really good.
Nothing's worrying me.
On an entertainment scale is a little bit different for me because, this movie is good. Spider-Man 2 is a very good movie. For a lot of people, it's their favorite Spider-Man movie. And I can kind of see where you're coming from. But at the same time, and I've always felt this way about it, I get kind of bored. It's not a movie I go back and watch very often because to me, there's a kind of, to a point, a lack of sense of fun in the movie unless there's action. A lot of just the storytelling, while it's really good for what they were trying to set up and things like that, it's kind of dull. It's kind of slow. And so, when I went into this watching it as a kid, I was a little bit disappointed by Spider-Man 2, to be totally honest with you. And it hasn't really changed for me that much. I admire it a lot more now that I can kind of see what they were doing, where they were going for it. But yeah, I can't say I'm extremely entertained by this movie. I mean, there were times I was like, okay, let's move on. Let's move forward. Let's get Spider-Man back on the screen. So I gave it a 3 out of 5. It's good. I'm entertained enough by the action and some of like the other scenes in it that are good that I'm entertained enough to watch it and finish it, but it's not one that I ever really crave to go back and watch.
Yeah, and I kind of actually had the opposite effect. I looked back on this movie prior to this last viewing, thinking that I was going to give it a 5 in entertainment. I really thought that I was going to love this movie because I remembered watching it, and the only 2 scenes I ever really thought about were the bank scene and the train scene, and every now and again I'd think about the death of Doc Ock.
Yeah.
But there's so much more to it than that, and I found myself bored frequently. I would say I would still say this is my favorite Spider-Man movie. Likely, we'll see as time goes on. I know that I like this one better than I like the next 3 that we'll see. But watching it, there was just many moments when I was just bored.
Yeah.
And so I had to give it a 3. Because though throughout the majority of the movie, probably, I was really enjoying myself, there were scenes where I was just like, can we move on?
Yeah.
And you don't ever want to be in a movie where you just want it to end.
Yeah.
So I had to give it a 3.
Yeah, I agree with that. When you add all of my scores together and average it out, I gave Spider-Man 2 a 3.7. So it's a really good score. It's not the best score I've given a movie, but it's good. It's a good movie. It's worth watching. And if it's your favorite Spider-Man movie, then good on you. I can understand where you're coming from to a point. It's not mine. In fact, there's a lot of other Spider-Man movies I like better than this one, but it's good. I enjoy it.
We'll see. I surprisingly gave it a little lower than you. I gave it a 3.6 as my average. I don't think that we'll see a Spider-Man movie higher than that, except for maybe Tom Holland.
Those are the ones I enjoy more.
We'll see. I haven't seen both of the Tom Holland movies. I've only seen one of them. And I did enjoy it. I have some beef with that, but we'll get there.
We'll get there.
But for right now, I think this is the best Spider-Man movie, and I gave it a 3.6 total, which brings our average to a 3.65.
3.65. Good movie, respectable movie.
Yeah.
Worth seeing.
Absolutely.
Tune in next week as we continue our journey through every cinematically released superhero movie to watch Elektra 2005. Neither of us have seen this movie. We didn't actually know this movie existed until we looked it up.
I knew it existed.
Oh, I didn't.
I just wish that it didn't. This movie has very poor reviews, and I'm not excited, but we do it for our 11 viewers.
We do it for the fans, absolutely. So tune in next week, 2005's Elektra. See you later.
Peace.